Zoller-Gringer, Chair of the Parks and Recreation Committee. It's 6:04, and welcome to tonight's meeting, June 12th, 2023. I'm delighted to see so many people here. We have an interesting topic this evening, and we're delighted to have you. The meeting is hereby called to order, and it is being recorded. We're recording it in accordance with the New York State Open Meetings Law. It's our practice to ask the members of our committee to keep their cameras on. We ask all attendees to be muted unless they are speaking. And if you are speaking, I urge you, if possible, to turn your camera on. So, as I say, welcome. I'm going to get the agenda here and get started. So the first thing is I don't know if she's joined us yet, but we are delighted to have a new member tonight, and I'm going to try to pronounce her name correctly. Shlithal Shobawali. Are you on board yet tonight? All right, perhaps you're a couple of minutes late, but we're delighted to have a new member. Our other members go around. We have our secretary. Who's it? You could just raise your hand and say hello, Thomas.
Hi, everyone.
Thank you. Okay, Jennifer.
I'm Jennifer Melby, member of the committee.
And Jennifer, thank you for sharing the job of secretary this evening. I appreciate it with Thomas. Richard, do you want to introduce yourself fully here?
Okay.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Richard Morrow. I'm a community member of the Parks Department, Parks Commission.
Thank you. Carolyn, good evening.
Good evening. My name is Carolyn Hubbard Kamanan, member of the board and of this committee. Thank you.
Okay, Doug.
Good evening, everyone. Doug Bettner, member of this committee and the board. Nice to see you all.
Okay. Shlithal, I see you now. Would you like to say good evening? And again, welcome to the committee. We're delighted to have you.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm trying to figure out what's wrong with my video. I can't seem to turn it on. It's not letting me. Oh wait, there you go. Oh no, it's still not working. It's okay. I'm Sheetal Shobawali. I'm a member of this committee. I just joined the community board this past. Oh, here I am. This past month. So thank you very much for having me.
Okay, did I miss anybody? Taya?
I think that's everyone.
Okay, great. Thank you. Do I have a motion to adopt the agenda for this evening? Richard? And Jennifer, second. Are there any objections to the motion? Hearing none, we'll adopt that motion and the agenda. Next on the agenda is the adoption of the minutes from May 2023. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes, Richard? A second? Doug, is that a yes? Thank you. Are there any objections to the minutes as presented? Hearing no objections, the minutes will be adopted. And Thomas, thank you again for taking those minutes. Are there any comments at this time about our proposed agenda, which is now the adopted agenda? Look, thank you. I'm seeing none. At this point, we'll turn to the evening's agenda. And I'm delighted to say that we have two representatives here. David Sarin, who's the Assistant Commissioner for Business Development and Special Events, and Barbara Wang, the Project Manager of the Revenue Division from, I believe it's the Department of Parks, right? And yes, and I particularly want to welcome you here tonight to talk about development proposals for Anchorage Plaza, which for those of you who aren't familiar with it, is space adjacent to the Brooklyn Bridge. We were both here back in November to tell us what you were going to do. You were seeking information and proposals for developing that space on a temporary basis in case access was ever needed to the bridge and by the Department of Transportation, which presently has a parking lot there. And I really want you, and you said you'd come back. We asked you to come back once you had some proposals, and you said you would. And not everybody does that. So I want to really thank both of you for hearing us and for coming back tonight to give us an update of where you are. So we'll turn the floor over to the two of you. And again, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Barbara, and thank you, Taya, and everyone for coming back today. Barbara, can we pull up the presentation?
Yes, go ahead.
Oh, does it work now? It says the host disabled participant screen sharing.
Who's running the slides, please?
Barbara.
I am.
There you go.
Thank you. Oh, got it.
Barbara, you're muted, just so you know.
Can you all see?
Not yet.
Oh, strange. Hold on.
Okay, now it's loading.
Perfect.
Okay.
That's
Awesome.
good.
Okay. So as Barbara mentioned, we came in November to talk about Anchorage Plaza. As everyone knows, DOT has been there for a very long time. The expectation is that DOT will exit the site at the end of this December. And Parks is working hard to try and come up with an activation with the site, understanding that the bridge is DOT's property, and that DOT will need to come back both in the short term and a likelihood in the long term for ongoing repairs to the bridge, and also for potentially for BQA related work. But of course, I think there's a lot to be figured out there, not part of Parks's world. In any event, we in March we went through with a request for expressions of interest, and the notion here was just to get as many ideas as we could for how the space could be activated in a way that was appreciated and valued by as many people as possible. So today we're going to come back to you and we just want to share what the feedback and the responses we've gotten. Barbara, do you want to go to the next slide? So we'll get into a little bit more of an overview, a recap of the RFEI. We'll do a summary of the proposals that we received, and literally we'll go one by one. I believe overall there were 7 of them, and then a Q&A, and we will do our best to answer all of the questions that everyone has tonight. Next slide. So this is just a reminder. Now, in full disclosure, just so everyone, when we came here in November, the proposal was for the west side of Anchorage Plaza along Old Fulton Street, and we were going to focus on that area. And what we heard back from people who had attended the meeting, and from others, electeds, was that what the letter from the former DOT commissioner talked about, turning over the whole space. So we took a look at that and tried to be responsive to the sentiment that we were hearing, and so we got back together, and we were in touch with the community board, and we expanded the potential for the RFEI, which is just to say that there would still be this offset that you see highlighted in the upper right-hand corner of the slide, the 50-foot buffer area, but that we were adding the Washington Street side, and as well as kind of this rectangular space under the bridge. And I know that that really is important to a lot of people just for pedestrian purposes. It can be very narrow trying to get from Old Fulton to Washington Street if you're going by Prospect Street, or vice versa, going from Washington to Old Fulton. So it certainly was, a desired kind of path, I think, for a lot of, people walking around the neighborhood. So this is what was ultimately put forth in the RFEI, the area in green. We can go to the next slide, Barbara. So in total, Parks received 11 responses, and of the 11, 7 proposals. So we're going to go over the proposals today. The responses, there were a handful of people, from the community who gave us thoughtful and helpful feedback regarding what they would like to see at the site. So we, have gotten back to them, but these are instances in which, from what we could tell, it was an individual who was telling us what they would like to see at the site, which is, wonderful, and certainly we appreciate that feedback. But the proposals that we're looking at are entities that have responded saying, this is what we would like to do at this site, and have a little bit more kind of that they can bring to the table in terms of actually moving forward and executing on the ideas. So the ideas, it ranged a lot of stuff, we kind of talked about, seasonal activities, markets, paddleball, pickleball, mini golf, a cafe, art space, some stuff that, was very creative, like micro mobility parking, things of that nature. So these are, this is kind of like a general flavor of the ideas that we heard back. And so I do also, before we move forward, I just want to set expectations for today in terms of what we're going to be talking about. We're going to be going over the ideas. We're going to focus on the ideas. We're not going to talk about who proposed these ideas. Because in any instance, if we move forward with an RFP, it's going to be an open competitive process. So we really do want to focus on what was proposed. And then I think the other thing I want to be clear about is there may be questions that we can't answer. Certain proposals had more detail and more information than others. And I think that is totally fine. The idea is to get a sense of what the ideas were, and then to be able to kind of, figure out, is that something we could potentially put into a subsequent RFP. So we'll do our best to answer questions, but sometimes there weren't always, the ideas just hadn't made it, to a degree where we might be able to answer something that is a little bit more specific or particular. And then some, as we were going back and forth, we've met with all of the groups that we're going to be talking about. Some were just able to get back to us more often than others in terms of answering follow-up questions. And I see there's a question about micro-mobility parking. We will get to that when we get to the slide. And again, if there's anything that's not answered, let's, we will have a time for the micro, for trying to get to all, questions.
David, before you begin, I just,
yes, Barbara.
Okay, I wanted to, obviously, we're very interested in what you have to say, but I also want to know what, if anything, you want from this committee tonight, so we can listen with that in mind.
Well, ideally, I mean, first and foremost is we would appreciate feedback, just in terms of thoughts. I mean, an RFEI is not something we do all the time. We do it when there's not a totally clear, clear picture of what should happen at a space. And this is a unique one because it's a very large space. It's certainly in a very busy area. But there are certain limitations to it, not the least of which are kind of, just like it's in a noisy area. It's, there's not, great access to utilities. We know DOT is going to be coming back, and we will have to, do things that are flexible and then, potentially, seasonal. So we really just want feedback. I think ideally it would be helpful for us just to have a letter from the community board saying, hey, Parks, we understand you've looked into this space, and, and we are supportive of a short-term RFP. And we want to use this feedback to help figure out our next steps.
So when you say short-term RFP, you mean the contract awarded would be a brief
Yeah.
duration?
Yeah, a brief duration. And for us, brief is in that 5-year mark.
Okay,
If we did a longer contract, we would, generally when we do that, we're looking for more investment in capital, something that's fixed. And it wouldn't be fair for us to ask anyone to make a larger capital investment that wasn't a personal property, because we just don't know precisely how this area will be impacted by future construction.
thank you.
Can we go to the next slide, Barbara? So just a quick one on how we wanted to come up with some uniformity in how we presented the following ideas. So, we came up with broad categories. Certainly people might feel like, one should be in a different category, but the mixed use space is, these are going to be ones where it's like seasonally something's, the use is changing from one thing to another. The art space, I think self-explanatory. First and foremost, it's it's public art, followed by some other elements, and then play space, things where it's more active recreation, art space being perhaps a little bit more passive. Seasonal, something like a market, or multi-season, pickleball, something that can span multiple seasons, so it could bring a spring, summer, maybe get some fall in there depending on the weather, but a little bit of a longer duration within the year. And then cost. So some are in terms of what was proposed to us, there's a fee. Others were more mixed and kind of like they wanted to figure out a way to really make it the site as accessible as possible, which is something we're looking for. And I think I've said it to this committee. I know I said it at the site meetings. Parks is not really looking for a large fee here. What we're looking for is an idea that can work well with a large number of people and be something that is enjoyable to people, and accessible from a price perspective. So with that, let's jump into it. So the first proposal we had is for an art space. It would be multi-season. It would be a mixed cost. I think, to be straightforward with everyone, that's still something in terms of the mixed cost, how that would work. We'd have to have a conversation with DOT, but some really creative and interesting ideas here. The panel art that you see on the upper left-hand side, just to be clear, would not be affixed in any way to the archways of the bridge. So it would provide kind of the aesthetic appearance that it was part of the archway, but it would be, designed and installed in such a way that it would not be attached to the bridge. On the upper left, on the upper right-hand corner, this is something that we do from time to time in parks. We'll do it with like a basketball court or a tennis court. We call them creative courts, but this is just adding color and dimension through paint, and design to an otherwise kind of drab asphalt space. Now, certainly this is not, none of these, designs or color patterns are things that, like, any decisions have been made on. But this is just to provide everyone on this call with a notion of what the of kind of what the idea is, and then also kind of creating, blending art with just functions. So public seating, sculpture garden, things like that. On the bottom side, there's some really cool ideas of having like large sort of decorative lamps that double as seating and some lighting, just again for passive recreation. And then, thoughts again, this is just something that really does need to be fleshed out. Perhaps farmers markets, perhaps like a, sort of like a, an artist's presentation that might be, might have a fee attached to it. A notion of having an amphitheater, but more, I think more along the lines of like a live performance, not necessarily an amphitheater, something that would have a build out, perhaps a cafe. I think the idea is, how could we, pay for the cost of maintaining this art and keeping it secure, and developing some sort of ancillary and complementary activities that would help, offset that cost. So that is proposal one. We're just calling it, art space, and and I should have mentioned, very initially we've reviewed these with DOT, but certainly there's further discussion that's warranted in all of what we're discussing today. Barbara, can we go to the second one? So the second proposal is, this is play space, multi-season, mixed cost. This would be, a combination of pickleball and paddleball, that would include, some sort of food service, to help, also to kind of complementary public seating. So I just want to stress that the seating here is public. We've also spoken to the, to the proposer, who ensured that there would be open access under the bridge, so that people could use it, for during all operating hours, to get from one side of to another, from Washington Street to the other side. And and that it would, they have also added a dog run, and this was a proposer that stressed to us the goal of having this really be a social place, and working with a lot of organizations to find times that were either very on the low cost, or also kind of like for kids and schools to help them come here, and do the programming here, again at a low cost or no cost. That's still something that's being figured out. And also I should just point out, these images, I think where we are now in discussions with people is the fencing would stay up. I think, and we'd have to find ways to make it more attractive. Of course, it would be open and have to be very clearly open to the public with signage and things like that, and hours would have to be posted. But overnight, especially late at night, the need to secure just this larger space, and also kind of the the under the bridge components, there's people seem to be leaning toward like, hey, it would be very pricey to do it any other way. So some of these renderings are really shown to enhance the aesthetics, but in all likelihood there would still be fencing there. Barbara, if you could go to the next slide. So this was another proposer who was interested in a combination of pickleball and paddleball. At least where they were currently, is they were a little bit more, they were a little bit more firm in their feet and make their model work. And they needed, and so they, they had there was less of like a mix of low cost or free and fee based. This was mostly fee based. And it was a mix of paddle, and they had, and this was more built out in terms of having a pro shop, having a locker room, they do have public seating, and and a clubhouse for food and beverage that would be open to non-players. I think this one is a little bit more kind of like specifically geared all around pickleball and paddleball, where I think the other one was a little bit more, hey, we're going to have something for people with dogs. We want to, a little bit less space on, at least on pro shops and locker rooms, and more on kind of having it, an open space, which, I think depending on where you're coming from, if you really like pickleball and paddleball, maybe a dedicated space is more appealing. I think that's something that, we're curious to hear back from everyone on the call. Again, on questions, we will get back to those questions at the end of this process, or at the end of this overview. So proposal 4, this was really interesting and creative. This was mixed use, multi-season, so combination of a cafe, a dog park, would have a membership option, some open air art galleries, perhaps composting, a play space for kids, and micromobility. So that is really, we're talking about things like scooters and bikes, a place for them to dock. That would have to be, again, so parks, we're always talking about parks appropriate use. So like, in full transparency, if this is an idea that really gained traction, we'd have to have a more involved conversation with Parks' general counsel and perhaps with the city law department. The notion here, I think, being is that it would be a de minimis portion of the site that would be devoted to some parking and perhaps make the site more accessible to people who were on bikes so that they could enjoy the space without having to travel around with their bikes kind of at their side at all times. But this one is certainly very eclectic, and we really liked the idea of a space that could potentially appeal to a wide variety of users and interests. Can we go to proposal number 5? So this one, so the proposal 5, this is more mixed use, seasonal, mixed cost. This was based on different seasonal activations. So, on Mother's Day and Father's Day, we'd have flowers and a garden center. They would seek to try and find times for farmers markets, do flea markets, and on Halloween, in October, in the fall, a pumpkin patch and a hay maze, and and then tree sales in December and other sort of activations. I think this one was also an interesting one. I think it's operationally, I think this proposer felt like this they were very interested in the space. They thought it was an amazing space. They also thought it was, while they really liked their ideas and they thought they could work, they didn't know that it would really fill the space in a way that would activate all of it. And I think there's challenges related to taking stuff in and taking stuff out all the time, and then switching it up, and to get that right every time, it's hard to get something right once. But again, it was a really creative idea, and the entity that proposed it was confident that they could do it well. But I think it's trade-offs like with so many different ideas. If we go to the proposal 6, so this was also kind of a mixed use space, similar to proposal 5. They wanted to have spaces for concerts, for theatrical performances. I know we had heard some concerns about concerts. This was so we wanted to be upfront that this was something that was being proposed, and if people have strong feelings about that part of it, I know I've heard that before. Selfie signs, play space, mini golf course, art installations, holiday markets. So again, very creative in terms of wanting to use a space for as many different options for the public as possible. But also, just I think it's really, I think operationally you have to be very sharp and organized to be able to pull off so many different uses within a certain amount of time over the course of the year. Next. And then this one was a mixed cost seasonal play space for kids age 6 to 12. So we were very glad that that there was we have a proposal focusing on younger kids, and how to make this space as kind of like as attractive for them as well. There would be certainly a fee portion where the site would be closed, and then a time when it would be open. There were operational challenges that exist. I think in order to make this work, there would have to be a lot of stuff like soil and things that would be brought in, and that's not stuff that is easily movable. And so something that DOT had concerns about in terms of, we kind of needed stuff to be, if someone in a case of emergency had to get it out in a day or two, they could make an operational case for how they would do that. In this case, it was more challenging. But again, we're sharing every single proposal that we received, and this was certainly unique and creative, and we were very appreciative to this group for sharing this. So we're sharing it with all of you. And those were the 7.
Thank you for that, David. It's certainly very interesting, and a number of different uses and some similarities. And it's interesting to note that you now have this much larger space that's under consideration. First, we'll begin with questions from committee members. So do any committee members have questions?
Yes.
Raise your hand. All right, Richard?
Yeah, I'm just curious about the, Ed, I mean, the proposals are really great. It all looks good, but from the big section of the park on Washington Street, right across the street is Clumber Hill, which is the biggest dog park you can have. And that's all it's dedicated to that. I don't know why we take up more space across the street when we, for dogs. When you have Clumber Park, which is the whole hill there, Clumber Hill. So I'm just suggesting that you may want to think that out a little better in terms of where the dog runs.
Yes. Look, I'm embarrassed to say this. I didn't, I'm not a dog owner, and I didn't realize that there was that is indeed a dog run there.
That's a big one too, yeah. Clumber Hill it's called. It's just a dog run. Clumber is a breed of dog. That's where the name comes from. They made that a dedicated, that whole thing. You see it up there? Where I don't know. I can't see anymore. York Street. Clumber Hill is right across the street. That's it.
Oh, that's where the Biggie Small statue is.
Right.
Yeah,
I mean, people may go up there with their dogs. I mean, I go sledding there with my kids back when there used to be snow, but like, that's
Right.
not a dog run.
But that's what it is. That's what it's.
That might be a de facto dog run, but it's not something where people should be going to dog runs. I mean, dog runs normally, they tend to be more level. They're more asphalt because it's much easier to clean, dog waste. And there's fencing around, and there's normally spaces for small dogs and for larger dogs so they can run. So that might be a dog run that's used by the community to let their dogs off leash. But, the city has rules, and, you can have dogs off leash in designated areas, if memory serves, before 9 a.m. and after 9 p.m. But that's not to the best of my knowledge, that is not an actually dedicated dog run.
You may want to check that, because I know I checked it, and I was told it was, that's why it's called Clumber.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I could be wrong. I'll double check for
No,
sure.
I may be wrong too, but I was told this years ago that's a dedicated dog run, that it was made that way for dogs. I don't know who did it, but at any rate, an observation that should be checked out before we start building more dogs.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
And calling on Richard reminded me, I don't see it in the minutes, but at the time, I think Richard asked that there be some mention of the indigenous people who live there, or I don't know if that was.
Absolutely, yes, and that was in the RFEI. Yes, we
Okay.
took note and we put that in, and we will, and in any subsequent RFP, that we will have that language there as well. Absolutely.
Thank you.
I wrote a history of Old Fulton Street, starting with the Native American. So I think I promised to send it to you, but I have a copy now. I can send you an email I can send it to
We
Dave.
would appreciate that.
Yeah, and it gives their whole history from the Native Americans up to the present, on all its different names. It had about 7 or 8 different names. It's an incredible street. It's the only street in the United States that really, it's the oldest, most it has the most connected to the history of the United States out of any other street in the history of the city. But I'll send you you'll read it.
Please do. Yeah, I'd be really
It's about 30 pages. So
okay, great.
Thank you, Richard. Are there any other committee members who have questions?
Barbara, I have.
Is that you, Doug? Yes, please go ahead.
Hi, David. Hi, Barbara. Thank you for giving us a little sneak peek of the proposals before prime time. I just wanted to follow up on something that Mr. Dew put in the chat. And also just, I heard you mention it briefly. David, how are you handling utilities at the site? You said they were limited there. So I'm just curious how that's being handled and how that's being sold to potential proposers, and also restrooms. You know, just the fixed infrastructure in place for restrooms, and if it is, and if it isn't, how that would be handled. Thanks.
So that's, yeah, those are all really critical questions. There is electric available at the site. So, you know, I can't speak exactly to the load capacity. From what we've seen, nothing that's been proposed, I think, would have a tremendous pull on electric. So, you know, in terms of, you know, having some, you know, lighting set up for, you know, for pickleball or, you know, some, you know, smaller electrical needs, I think, you know, they should be able to work with the site. In terms of water, you know, that is an issue. So if you want to have a cafe, if you want to serve food, anything other than kind of like, you know, like the carts, you know, that's a problem that that is going to be on an operator to have to work out with DOHMH. They have to have the proper certifications, both from the staff serving the food, and ensure that there is the ability for staff to, you know, to be able to wash their hands.
So David, that's you're saying that there's no running water and or active plumbing in that location, or can that be?
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Just
right.
curious if
And-
that was a nice way of saying there's no plumbing and active water there.
Yeah, right. No, I'm sorry. I'm not trying to beat around the bush. I mean, I'm not, it is just there, you know, there's a limit that it's limited. So the city does not have money for this project. That's, you know, that's one of the reasons we're doing it this way. So proposers would have to, you know, either make an investment in, you know, in the, like the porta johns, and having, you know, like, you know, water tanks there. And they'd have to figure out part of that with DOHMH. Those are solvable matters.
No, I hear you.
But
I just
it's
wanted
got
to
to be
put it out
something
there.
they've got to.
I just wanted
Yeah.
to put it out there because, you know, people look at it differently when you're talking about porta potties and not running water, as opposed to infrastructure that has running plumbing. So I just wanted to put that out there.
Yeah, no, and we have tried to make that clear in the RFEI and certainly any other proposer meetings that we've had. It's like, you know, so many of our sites are as is, and this is, you know, this is one example of that.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thanks, Barbara.
Thank you. Any other questions from committee members?
Barbara, I have a question. This is Sheetal.
Sure, go ahead.
I might be new to this, and I hope I'm not repeating questions that have already been answered in the past. What is the access points, or like, how do you sort of access this from a pedestrian or cyclist? Hopefully not drivers too much, but like, because it's kind of, I'm just looking at it on Google Maps. I'm kind of curious about that. And then also I noticed with the pickleball, it's near a street. Is there going to be like a way to avoid balls or any kind of things going into the street and people running in, like I'm imagining kids in play spaces, and from a safety perspective? So those are my questions right now. And
Yeah,
also
so
remediation of like what's there now. Is there anything like hazardous there that is concerning for having kids and things like that?
So I'll start with the last question in terms of remediation to kind of set the stage for the subsequent questions. So when DOT leaves, their responsibility is to kind of, you know, have a broom swept and ensure that, you know, none of the cables or, you know, any other remnants from the construction projects are there, and then they are going to repave the entire lot. So that's all approximately 60,000 square feet is going to be repaved. So there should be no trip hazards, or, you know, any sort of other kind of like dangerous conditions, impalement hazards sticking out of the ground. They're not leveling, so it'll still be a little bit uneven, or in some cases a lot uneven, but they are repaving. In all discussions with everyone who's proposed, So far, they have said that they feel they need to keep the fences up, but that they need to make them aesthetically much nicer and more welcoming. So I'm hopeful that we'll get some creative ideas for that, how to make them colorful. And then generally where the fences are, there's swing gates that are swinging in now. I think we may want to look into something with a potential operator where the gates are not swinging, but they can kind of they can just go in. Um, but there's an east point of access and there's a west point of access. So it's not accessible right now to the general public because it's a construction site, but along Old Fulton Street and along the Washington Street, there would be access points for for people to come in. We have not contemplated at this point having any cars coming in unless they were loading something in for the operation, but it's not something where we're in any way looking to make it parking for anyone. um, and I think it's a good question about, like, once you have those access points, like we'd have to be very thoughtful about where the pickleball courts were, because we wouldn't want anything going into the street, and that would be something we'd have to work with any subsequent operators to be able to arrange it so that both, like, there's not balls going to the street, but also, like, you know there's a clear route for pedestrians who are not playing pickleball to be able to walk through and not feel like they're walking through some obstacle course to get from one side to the other.
I have a question just to clarify. These three sort of separate but connected parcels, they're all DOT and they're all going to be turned over to Department of Parks?
um I'm sorry, I don't know if I caught all that question. It's all parks. It's none of that is DOT. So everything that's outlined in green in that, Barbara, I don't know if you still have your screen up, or if you can put it up. Yeah, so everything that's highlighted in green here is parks. But I do want to point out that in this kind of middle area under the bridge, the bridge itself is DOT. DOT has asked us to kind of minimize the amount of activity under the bridge, for security reasons, and that's something we're working hard to try and honor with them, and make sure we understand it and we can convey it to to everyone if in any subsequent conversations about operating the space. But this is all mapped parkland.
Okay, and it's just that DOT has been using that Anchorage Plaza space for about a dozen years.
Yep.
Okay,
Yeah.
I appreciate that clarification. All right, now I'm going to ask for any questions from board members. We're not part of or part of the ones here. Okay, I don't see any. Taya, do we have people in the chat who asked to speak?
We have several comments, and I would really recommend and encourage you to raise your hand and speak it into the public record. I also see Carolyn Hubbard come in and raise hand, and
Oh, I'm sorry.
Calvis from Dumbo Bid is with us as well.
All right, so Carolyn, I'm sorry I didn't see your hand. Please go ahead. Another committee member.
Yeah, I was a little late in raising it. I'm a little confused about Department of Transportation doesn't want people to use that passage under the bridge, but how do you get from one side to the other of that site? It's not clear to me.
Oh, I'm sorry, Carolyn. You know what? I didn't do a good job explaining on that. So in no way or shape or form am I trying to suggest that they have an objection to people passing. Their concern was like long stay. So if someone was going to be under there for, like, eating a meal for an hour or something like that, that is the kind of thing they were trying to discourage. But the transitory use, and look, just to be transparent, that's still something we're in discussion with them about, because we do want to try and maximize the space we have. But the transitory use in terms of, like, hey, I'm in the neighborhood, I want to get from this side to the other, that is not a matter of debate. That is something that we fully intend to happen.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Caroline. All right, Calvis, had your hand up. You identify
hi.
yourself, please.
Hi, good evening. My name's Calvis Mickelsteins. I'm with the Dumbo Business Improvement District. Thanks for hosting the meeting and thanks to the Parks Department for being here. I had a quick question, kind of jumping back to the fences and the gates. Just for clarity, are the two entrance gates that are existing the only access points that will remain, or is there a chance for them to move or the fencing to change in any other way?
Barbara should correct me if I'm wrong. I think those are the two access points that exist. There's no requirement from us that those remain the access points. So we are very much open to anyone who wants to propose different access points, or some other configuration. I think any idea that someone has that they think could work better than what's there is like, we want it to be as useful and practical as possible. But Barbara, are those the only two? Maybe I'm just like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Those are what I've used.
Those are the only two. So the one on Old Fulton Street and the other one on the Washington Street side.
And is there an opportunity for the height of the fence to change? I know there are questions about pickleball and if balls are flying, I'm thinking higher or lower. I know you said it had to stay, but trying to get an idea of the flexibility on that.
I think, yes, there's flexibility. I mean, I think it's just the trade-offs are the costs. It's like that this is not going to be a long-term RFP for the reasons we've discussed. And anyone who's there is going to want to make sure the site is secure, over late night hours. So if it's too low and someone can just hop over it, it may not be that effective. But if someone wanted to strategically make it higher in other places because they didn't want the ball flying over a fence, that's totally, that's totally fine.
Great, thank you.
All right, before we go on to other questions, I see another committee member who's here now. Melinda, did you want to ask a question before we move forward? I wanted to give you an opportunity. You need to unmute.
I don't think Ms. Rasko's hand was raised.
Okay, just wanted to make sure. Thank you. All right, Suzanne Quint, good to almost see you tonight. Always welcome to have you.
Hi, everyone. Sorry to be off camera. I have COVID, so I'm not looking so great. First of all, I want to thank David and Barbara. You guys really worked with us as a Dumbo resident community to have additional sessions and get additional proposals for the spaces. So thank you very much, and for coming back as well. I'll give some of my views that I think really jive with what I'm seeing in the comments from other Dumbo residents. Definitely ideas for the neighborhood versus for the tourists. With that, my view as a resident would be thumbs down to things like flea markets, holiday markets, definitely concerts and theatricals. We don't need to drive more people to the neighborhood. The pickleball, and I think, I sense this from your comments, David, as well, just making sure that if it was something like pickleball, that the operator was really dedicated to public usage. In my view, as a community member and former member of the Parks Committee, there's a lot of public space that gets used by private operators, the marina and Brooklyn Bridge Park, Governor's Island, it makes me, I'm just not okay personally. Really, none of us should be with public space going to private operators for commercial gain. So pickleball, I know it's popular, if it's something that's very accessible for people. And then my question is on the dog runs, because I know from my time on the Parks Committee, there's a lot of requirements for a dog run. So I wanted to hear the Parks Department view on having a dog. On having a dog run there. I also know from my time on the Parks Committee that there's a lot of demand for dog runs in the area. And we actually do not have, agree with what was clarified. Clumber is not an actual dog run. We actually do not have, besides a teeny dog run underneath the bridge in Brooklyn Bridge Park, we don't have a large dog run in the immediate area. So yeah, would just like clarification on if a dog run is actually a possibility.
Thank you, Suzanne, and wishing you a speedy recovery. So with the dog runs, I mean, I think first and foremost, yes, I see it as a possibility. You know, there's space. Like there's, you know, no doubt about it. There's space. I I have to admit, you know, and I can get back to folks. I'm less familiar with the precise requirements of a dog run. I've seen them done in many different ways. You know, generally speaking, you know, like I said earlier, there's space for bigger dogs and for smaller dogs. They really have been, I think, community driven in the way that the rules have been promulgated. And so, you know, there's, you know, people have to be good actors and responsible for their dogs to ensure that other dogs and people are all safe. And, you know, that's something that, you know, if we did an RFP and we got a proposal that incorporated a dog run, you know, we would have to have, you know, we would have to have a discussion with the operator, and you know, and at that point, we would talk to our general counsel's office, and we'd probably also, you know, have a conversation with the borough, with Marty, Commissioner Marr, and Davey Ives, his chief of staff, about what the norms are in Brooklyn, because I can't tell you with certainty that the way, you know, the way that a dog run is operated in Brooklyn is exactly. I think there should be a lot of overlap, but not exactly the way it'd be run in Queens or Staten Island. So sorry, I can't give you a great answer, but yes, it's possible. You know, and the dog run, but the dog runs, you know, what we got proposed also had a membership fee, and we don't have like a propose on the membership fee or things like that. And it's not that necessarily whatever came to fruition would have to have a membership fee if there were another, you know, if it was pickleball and the pickleball was paying and the dog run was like complimentary. You know, you know, that's something that would have to be figured out, and just to be totally, you know, upfront about it.
All right, thanks for the clarification. Membership fee aside, I think there would be a lot of community support for the dog run in the area.
Thank you, Suzanne. I hope you feel better soon. Might want to take your hand down. Bill, I'm not sure what the FFLA stands for.
FFLA is the Fulton Ferry Landing Association Community Group, a residential community group that dates back to 1988 in Fulton Ferry, and I'm on the board of that organization. One question I have is, without identifying which proposal, are you able to say whether the Dumbo bid is one of the 7 proposals?
I mean, Bill, I said I wasn't going to get into that, and I'm not going to get into it. We're really focused on the ideas, and any subsequent RFP that went out, I think, irrespective of anyone who proposed or responded, you know, it would be a competitive process at that point. And you know, the process, just so everyone knows, because we don't, you know, there's not a lot of RFPs. When we do an RFP, we have criteria. So the criteria is your, you know, your operational experience, your planned operations. There's capital, which is in large part on Barbara, why am I blanking on the environmental part of it?
Sustainability and integration.
Yes, integrated sustainable design
Yep.
is something that we, you know, we care very much about. And then, you know, your financial capability, meaning, do you have the funds to do what you plan to do, and the fee offer. And I'm telling everyone up front right now, the fee offer is not going to be a big part of this. So, you know, when we go into an RFP, those are the criteria, and that's how we're going to judge. But that's going to be done, you know, in a very kind of transparent way. But at this point, we really just want to focus on the ideas.
Okay. The other point I want to make is that these same parcels are part of the longer term BQE transformation project. That have been workshops as part of the BQE Central transformation that were run by the DOT and FFLA and Dumbo Action Committee attended those workshops and are part of the BQET, which is the alliance of community groups, about 20 different community groups from this area about the BQE transformation project. So we're familiar, we've been attending meetings both for this interim temporary use and also for the longer term plans. And there were very in-depth proposals or options that were put forward by the DOT for these parcels for the longer term that had renderings done, I believe, by WXY Studio. And there are no fences in any of the renderings for the usage of these parcels. So I'm curious about whether, there's a difference between the post BQE construction world and the temporary 3-year or so world. Why the fences would have to stay up from what you're presenting versus what the DOT presented to us at the workshops.
So, I mean, I think first and foremost, Bill, thank you for all of your advocacy and your dedication to this really critical project, the BQE project for the neighborhood and for the city. And it's a massive amount of undertaking. I hope I'm not breaking any news, but there's a big distance from the lip to the cup here between whatever renderings are shown now and whatever ends up happening. I have not seen many renderings of anything that include chain link fences because they're not appealing to look at, and they don't do anyone any good. And the renderings that we showed didn't have any fences, but I was telling everyone the fences in all likelihood would stay up. I really, I've spoken to our colleagues in planning. I'm aware of the of the of the renderings. I've seen some of them are really interesting. I do want to it is park property, so parks has certainly has a very important role in it, whatever permanent decisions are made. And I think what happens at the site for the long term is going to have an impact on how the the perimeter is secured. We really are focused on the short term, and that is kind of this 5-year marker. And the city at this point doesn't have funds to activate or program this space. So we'd be working with a separate entity to help come in and do that with us. And so they are going to be responsible for this site. And I think at the end of the day, if they're responsible for it, the city's self-insured, but whoever gets this space is going to have to insure it. So if there's no fence and someone, but it's after hours and someone is going through under that bridge and trips and falls, or, or something worse happens, they're going to bear some responsibility. So, although I'm certainly not crazy about the aesthetics of a fence or other things having to do with fences, I can understand why, in this short term, people have a have a need for it. I hope that answers a part of the question.
Yeah, thanks, David.
So just to clarify, is it expected that at some point, some or all of this area will be involved in the BQE? So
I'm sorry, Barbara, I didn't is it expected at some point that what?
that some or all of this area will be part of a BQE design.
Yeah, I think that, that's my understanding. And I think
Okay.
there's a lot of, a lot of really interesting discussion about that project and how the Anchorage Plaza will be impacted. And what it will look like for for a much longer future. But that's just that's just why we want to try to do something that's embraced by as many people as possible and enjoyed, and is better than what's happening there now, which is, not to, the work that DOT is doing is very important, but we want to get people back there and have something that is enjoyable for folks.
Okay. Doug, did you have another question?
Yeah, it was really brief, Robert. It actually kind of piggybacked on what you said there. I'm sorry, David, for the other question. We're talking a lot about short-term use. And I understand, BQE is on the horizon. Does Parks have a long-term strategic vision for this plot of land? And should that be thought about at all as part of this process? I know we just do the 5 years to get that site activated, but I think a longer term strategic vision, a capital plan per se, getting that on, council members' radars. Does Parks have a plan for a long-term vision, irrespective of the BQE, which could complicate it all? But I'm just wondering, we always seem to talk very short term, but I'm thinking long term. Like I'm thinking, do we return that to parkland? Does that become, next to the park right next to it? I'm just curious if there's discussions in Parks about a longer term strategic vision for this plot of land. Since it's been Parks, it just was taken over by DOT, but it's now coming back to Parks. And I'm just curious if there's been a thought about that, and what could be done to support that longer term vision, and maybe returning it to park land as opposed to commercial or other these ventures, which I totally understand why that's happening now to get us through the interim, but I'm just curious.
No, I mean, it's a good question, and there's a Parks has an amazing planning division and a specific office for
Exactly.
long-term planning, and I don't want to speak for them, other than to say that I think I could see, if we didn't have one, I could see the added dimension of challenge here, because if you don't know what's happening with different parts of the BQE and the eastbound and the westbound traffic, and what's happening anywhere from Sand Street all the way over to the triple cantilever, and impacts that may happen along where the Chapin playground is. There is a lot, Bill was just talking about. There's a lot of plans that have been out there going back to when Polly Trottenberg was commissioner, and then having that panel, and now having a kind of a new take on it. If they had done long-term planning then and seen those plans, they might have had to change everything, because we just don't know exactly how this is going to change traffic patterns. And so it's it is a particularly challenging one, but if you want, I could get in touch with Sarah Nielsen, who's the chief of long-term planning, and and connect her with Barbara. But I just don't know the answer in terms of is there a specific long-term plan for Anchorage Plaza?
Well, that kind of leads to another question. Has, given that this is just temporary and that at some point there may be some other use that is going to be identified for, has Parks considered just really putting in some grass, some benches for the time being? Is that something that you would have considered? Making it accessible to use right now.
We've talked about it. It's I know it's like it's something that I think seems like it's easy to do, but it's not easy to do. So without going into excruciating details, because it's sometimes more complicated than I understand, but we have to do a new need. We have to do a new need, both for our personnel that would manage the space, and and for whatever equipment we would need, and other than personnel services, the OTPS as we refer to it. And you're talking about an asphalt lot. They're going to repave the asphalt, DOT is. If we start talking about grass and lawns and seeding, and then maybe there's trees and there's planters, this is still a space that on a very short notice DOT could say to us, like, hey, for public safety reasons, for purposes of bridge repair, we need to come in here with X number of heavy duty vehicles, and we're going to be coming in because it's an emergency in the next 48 hours. And then we're going to have to, live with that. So I think, I would love to see more green space, than I think we all would versus asphalt. And I hope that day comes. But in the short term, the investment, and there's so many other places in the borough, in the neighborhood, in the city that, that need staffing. You'd have to, once that space is up, it's hard to just leave a space up. And I know we don't always see this. You have a lot of, sightline issues going through that, going under the bridge. You have to clean, you have to worry about, rats and other, other, like health issues. You have to worry about graffiti. I mean, we have, rules about graffiti and how quickly it has to be cleaned up. You're talking about 60,000 square feet of space then that has to be managed, operated, and maintained. And that takes people, that takes equipment, resources, and then to add, like we can't just put grass down. Then we have to do a design, and then we need to get funding, and that quickly starts to become something like a capital project. And a capital project could easily
Takes
take
a
5
while.
years.
Yes.
And by the
Know
time we were
that.
finished with it, it'd be time to, we got to now go demolish everything. So it's not, it seems like it's right there in so many ways, but it, unfortunately, given the way that the city works, it's a little bit further than that.
I hear you. Thank you. Mary, you've been very patient.
Yes, hi. Sorry about the thing. I got a thing on my face today, so I can't be on screen. I just want to know what's the timeline for this. Like when will the presentations be finalized, and when will somebody start this thing? Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. So I think ideally we would, we would like, however, Barbara and the community board would like to frame it, we would like a letter, telling us that you're supportive of a short-term RFP, and, focusing on whatever uses you thought were, were the most appealing, and, and we will go back to the drawing board and then, try to start working on an RFP. I think we would like to get an RFP out in the fall. Of course, Barbara and Taya, we would, keep everyone looped and as to what we're going, and we would send a notice out, and that's something that's just required anyway, but obviously call. And of course, we're always happy to come back, before the RFP goes out, or, whatever the committee would like us to do. And then we'd have to figure out how to craft it. I think that's, the RFEI was kind of like, we didn't have to really craft it very much, because like, give us your ideas. Now it's got to be a little bit more specific, because it has to be rated in a way that's generally, specific. It doesn't have to be, so like narrow that like you can only do this one thing, but it's got to be something that our attorneys feel like, hey, you can compare this thing to that thing. Like if someone proposes, I'm just like, I want to do a pharmacy, and someone else says, no, I want to do a hotel. It's like, how do you, those are two totally different things. So it's got to be something where it's like, we've got enough in common that, the people who are rating the proposal can do it, in a, in an equitable, transparent, and fair way. So the goal would be to get something out in the fall, and hopefully, start to narrow down an operator by the end of the year, or early next year. DOT has told us that in late winter, early spring of 2024, they would be repaving. They can't repave if it's too cold outside. So that would be the hope, is to try and time, a new contract with, that paving. And then depending on what the use is, I mean, I would love to tell you, I think we'll have someone there, by this time next year. But, if there's someone who says for whatever reason, hey, I really want to do this. I know it's only, a few years, but like, Douglas was saying, I want to get these utilities in, then maybe that's a different, that might take a little longer, because then they're going to have to connect to the city water system. So I think that's the best that I can tell you. I don't know, Barbara, would you add anything to that?
No, that sounds about right.
And you don't have any estimate, I mean, it's hard to come up with an estimate as to how long it would take if you had a vendor in place.
I'm sorry, Barbara, estimates to how long, what?
How long the process would take once you have a vendor in place.
No, I mean, once we have a contract, there's a public process we have to go to. And again, just to underscore, we would always keep the community board involved and advise. And one of those things is, before we award, there's a public hearing for the contract. There's a whole committee, the Franchise Concession and Review Committee, that would oversee that hearing. And then the contract would have to be registered by the controller's office. And then that could take 30 days. And then once it's registered, then technically we could start the contract. But it depends on what the group wants to do. If they have everything ready to go, and it's just a matter of like rolling out carpets and for a dog run and some pickleball courts and like bringing a few carts in for a cafe kind of setup, then okay, maybe it's done quicker. But it just depends on what someone ends up proposing. So the goal would be to have something in place by next year. We would absolutely love to have it in time for the summer, but I can't, that's at this point it is honestly aspirational. It's not something that I could tell you with any concrete timeline.
Thank you. Candid at all.
Thanks very much.
Thank you, Mary.
Nick DeSantis, you also have been waiting patiently.
Hi, thank you. I'll be brief. David and Barbara, thank you again for coming back to the community and giving us this information. I really appreciate it. I know we've asked a lot of questions over and over, and thank you for being patient. Just to be on the record, I want to also comment that I don't think we need something that's market-based or tourist-based. We need something that is resident-focused and community-focused. So hopefully the board will take that into consideration when we're looking at the RFP. And lastly, David, I know you don't want to give out the names of the groups that are sponsoring, but can we get a redacted version of all the RFEIs that were submitted so we can just look at them and have them at hand? Some of those pictures were great, and it's really hard to explain that to other people without actually having some of those presentations available.
Sure, we can figure something out.
Thank you.
I will, Barbara, if you could just find some time for us tomorrow to discuss briefly, and I think we'll talk to our attorney's office, but we'll work for the community board and with DAC and try to get something over, as soon as we can.
Okay, great. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks. And it sounds like you're going to work with Taya on that and give them to her, and then she can make them available.
We would love to work with Taya. Yes.
Okay, that would be great. Thank you. I think everyone who has wanted to ask a question has asked a question. Bill, do you still have your hand up from before? Do you very quickly want to ask one final question?
Yes, I wanted to continue my probing as an investigative reporter. Wannabe. David, can you say whether amongst the 7 proposals, whether it's a variety of startups to established concerns, or small company to large companies? Do you have a large variety?
Bill, I think David has already answered that question. He really doesn't want to get into particulars about these proposals.
Well,
I think we should respect that. He's been so candid about everything else.
That was more of a general question, but.
Well, I mean, we're not dealing with like Walmart or, any kind of like big chain or anything like that. I don't know if there's a specific concern about like, I don't know, equity residential didn't apply or anything like that. I don't, but it's, I think we really, we thank you, Barbara. I mean, we want to focus on the ideas, and I don't want, I don't want to distract from that, because like I said, this is, we really take the competitive process very seriously. And we're so grateful to everyone that responded and that took time to put their ideas together. And like Nick DeSantis from Dumbo Action Committee was saying, they put these things together, they put together renderings, and they, and that's not easy, that takes time. So, and we, and basically there was nothing promised and there was nothing that to give other than to give the time that it took to put those ideas so that we could all have a discussion about them. And so then we get to this next stage, which is, would be a competitive process. And now there could be other groups proposing, that is probably going to be something that will happen. So I don't really want to distract by getting into who it was, because I think it's really about like what could be here. And the feedback is, look, just to hear it, that if people don't want a flea market and a holiday market and concerts, then that's not something that we're going to pursue. We're not trying to swim upstream. We're trying to find something here that is, that is, like we said, embraced by as many people as possible.
Thank you. I think, David, and again, thank you for being patient, answering all those questions and concerns, addressing those concerns. What I heard you asking for tonight was twofold. We wanted to get feedback from this committee and the people who are here tonight. And I think you've gotten quite a bit of that. You also have asked, if possible, for a letter of support for what would be a short-term contract under this RFP using that space. And as part of that, if this committee were to recommend that the board issue a letter, we might include in that letter what types of uses would be most appealing from this committee. So with that in mind, I will ask if anybody here wants to make a motion concerning recommending to the board that we issue a letter of support for this RFP. And if you were going to make that motion, what you would, if there are any particular uses that you would propose to be considered. So does anybody want to make that motion? Then I'll make a motion. I don't see anyone raising a hand at the moment. I would like to make a motion to propose that we support the issue of an RFP that would involve a short-term proposal, and that Department of Parks, I'm not sure the right way to phrase this, but ask that the Department of Parks listen to what we heard tonight, that people are encouraged and want to have the space used and not just sit there idle, but ask that the use be respectful of being addressed to the use of local residents primarily. And I think we'd also ask that any use of the space, if there was a fee involved, that fee be, that the considerate, that it reflect the fact that there are people in this district who are low income and who would want to use the space and should be able to use the space irrespective of what the fee is. So those would be my two concerns, that any fee involved would be minimal or provide for people to use it without paying a fee, and that to encourage as broad a use as possible of the space of residents, and that primarily geared to residents rather than in that regard, that a flea market or a holiday market might not be the best. I kind of hesitate to suggest a limitation, but maybe just rather than limiting it, ask that the Department of Parks consider the concerns of the local residents. So I'll try to condense that again. So my motion would be that we do, or does issue, I was kind of thinking out loud, so I apologize for that, but that recommend to the board that they issue a letter of support in terms of an RFP that would provide for a short-term contract for this three-tiered space, and that the use of that space be reflective of the concerns raised by the residents of the area, and that any fee involved would provide for access for people of minimum. Does anyone want a second? Do I hear a second to that motion? Richard? Okay, thank you. Is there any discussion on the motion? Taya, would you like people to raise their hands when we vote, their virtual hands?
Sure, that works.
Okay, so if you're in favor of that motion, please raise your virtual hand.
I see 5.
Yeah, 5. Now you have to be a committee member to vote, and we welcome people joining the committee as public members. So please come back and consider joining the committee. So you said 5?
Actually, that was 6.
6, okay. And any opposed to the motion?
Please put your hands down.
Oh, thank you for that. Anyone opposed to the motion? I don't see any. Any abstentions? The motion passes 6-0-0. Thank you. And we're going to take you up, David and Barbara, on your request to come back. So, and please keep us. Will this be? I guess this will not be on Wednesday's meeting because it's not on the agenda. Taya, what do you think's the next step for this?
That's right. It will be discussed at the June 26th executive
meeting. Okay. Sorry about that. So thank you for everyone. And just to go further on the plug I just mentioned, we welcome people to come to this committee. Don't just come for an issue that you're particularly interested in. It's not that difficult to become a public member of the committee. Come for a few meetings, show that you're interested. We'd love to have you join. So please don't be a stranger. With that, we're going to go on to the next part of the meeting, the chairperson's report.
Thank you very much, Barbara. Thank you,
you're
Taya,
welcome.
and thank you, Barbara, for all of your
Yes.
hard work. Appreciate it. See everyone soon. Take care.
Thank you. You know you mean it, so thank
We
you.
do. Bye.
Okay. All right, I just want to get to my notes here. I just wanted to mention, I went for a walk. I don't really have much to report this evening. You know, this is our last meeting of the season, so to speak, summer break, unless there's something compelling for the committee to look at that time. So our next meeting will be in September. I did take a walk on Saturday, and as I was near Abolitionist Place, so I went over there, and there is definitely construction going on there. And I'm hoping that we will be hearing sometime in the near future an update on the progress of Abolitionist Place. If you have a chance to walk over and take a peek to see what's going on, you might want to do that. Then I think last Saturday was, a week ago, was the Trinity Park get together. I was attending one of those milestone college reunions. I'm wondering if there was anybody, my own, is there anybody on the committee who had any opportunity go to that event. Or maybe Kaya, you might want to tell us a little bit about it.
Sorry, Barbara, which event?
Wasn't that the Trinity Park get together?
Oh, Mr. Sid Meyer from our Transportation and Public Safety Committee meeting attended, and I believe Brian Howell from TNPS was there. I was at a community garden event.
Okay, all right, thank you. So we will move on. All right, next thing would be other committee business. Is where, just so you know, we are not starting to talk about the community statement needs tonight. We'll do that at another time for the next cycle. Is there any other committee business that anyone would like to bring up this evening?
Barbara, this is John. Do let me know when it's appropriate for me to speak.
That'll be in a minute. Just making a note here. All right, so I don't see anybody else bringing up a committee business that leads us to community forum. John, we'll turn the floor over to you.
Thank you so
for
much,
being here.
Barbara, and I'm certainly going to try to attend a bit more frequently. I did attend Dumbo Drop for the first time a couple of weeks ago, and I find that whole community quite amazing. My issues, though, were relative to the parks in the community and whether you have a total number of parks that are in the district. Is there a count of the number of parks that we have in the district?
I believe that's on the Parks Department website. I know we've gotten a list of that from time to time. And in fact, I think Davey Ives shared that last time he was here, just recently.
Okay, well, I'll follow up with Taya and see if I can get that information. The other piece that I wanted to mention is that, and this is relative to Fort Greene Park, but I guess it should include all of our parks. Is there a specific issue of homelessness that the parks are experiencing in the district? And I bring that up as board co-chair of the Myrtle Avenue Business Improvement District, in which Fort Greene Park is included. I'm getting reports of a homeless population that is in Fort Greene Park. And I'm not quite sure how to proceed with identifying the resources that would go out and validate that there is or maybe not the problem that I'm led to believe at this point exists in Fort Greene Park. But is this an issue? And it seemed appropriate because of your discussion tonight with the gates and the fencing and all that other stuff. Is this an overall issue in the community? I know it is in other aspects of the city, but I don't hear that routinely in Community District 2. And my final issue, Barbara, is insecurity. What we are looking at for the Myrtle Avenue Business Improvement District, we're going to be meeting with the 88th precinct to find out from them what specific blocks are most problematic. And then we're going to explore the opportunity to install some additional cameras. How all of this is going to work out and where the camera feeds are going to go and who's going to monitor and all that kind of good stuff. We have not worked out yet. This is all in the conceptual stage. So I just wanted to put that out there because it seemed also appropriate for discussion of what you're going to be doing under the bridge and the fencing and everything else that seems to be relevant for that project.
Okay. To go to your second question about homelessness, we have, at some point, someone did bring up during one meeting, someone did bring up a concern about that in one particular park. I don't remember where that was. It might have been Cadman Plaza at the time. Shakira Petaway is here. I don't know if she wants to address, if she feels comfortable addressing she's from the Conservancy. She has something that might address what we just brought up.
Yeah, sure. I'm happy to speak a bit on unhoused residents living or at Fort Greene Park. So yes, there are unhoused people, especially I think on the perimeters where you have on the Myrtle side, which of course that's where you're addressing specifically on the benches there and everything. And we do have a specific team, the community wellness team, that is at this point consists of one full-time, two part-time staff, but who are engaged in continuous outreach with our unhoused populations, anyone facing mental health issues, addiction, all of that stuff. And so there is like a proactive approach. Oh, Taya, thank you so much for pulling that up. Proactive approach to trying to actively provide resources to people by having these teams who are all peer specialists, so who themselves have experienced something along these lines and so know what that's like and can relate. And these peer specialists are then using their own personal experiences and the training that they have received to create relationships with everyone and then hopefully connect them to the resources that they need. And so that is how Fort Greene Park Conservancy is addressing the issue there. I can't speak to how it's being addressed in other parks in the area because this is a project specifically in Fort Greene Park in partnership with Services for the Underserved.
Thank you so much for that information. And someone from the bid office might need to reach out to you just to get some additional details and to see if there's any additional support that the bid can provide. Thank you.
Thank you, Shakara. As to your other question about insecurity, I don't know that this is the right committee for that. It's not something that we've really talked about here. I was thinking it might be more along the lines of public safety, Transportation and Public Safety Committee.
I do agree, and I will be bringing this up in the Public Safety Committee meeting. It just occurred to me that we should approach this in a combined effort. And since I was speaking specifically about Fort Greene Park, and I heard the presentation about under the bridge, I thought it would be good to just raise it so that we're all on the same page. Thank you, Barbara.
Sure. Thank you, John. Anybody else have something for community forum? Seeing nothing else, we're going to move on to adjourn. We have a motion to adjourn. Richard and Doug a second. Okay, hearing no objections. This meeting stands adjourned. Thank you all for your attention. And for those of you I'm not going to see for a bit, I hope you enjoy the summer. And please come back to our meetings. By having as many people as possible attend. Thank you. Have a safe night. Thank you, Taya.
Good meeting, Barbara.
Thanks, John.